Welcome to Christendom Conversations. Together we'll explore the wisdom of the Catholic intellectual tradition, engage with thought-provoking ideas, and uncover deep insights into the perennial questions. We're thrilled to have you with us. Let's dive into today's conversation. Well, it's a great pleasure to have Professor John Cuddeback here today. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
We have a lot to talk about.
Good.
I'm going to say that you are a professor of philosophy here at the college, but there's much more to be said. So could you share a bit about your background, maybe your family, your academic training?
Sure. Well, thank you, George. Thank you for this opportunity. I love talking. As some of my colleagues say, we're paid to talk, so we hopefully get decently good at it. I had the pleasure to go to Christendom once upon a time. It was different in certain ways and the same in certain ways. And that's where I fell in love with philosophy, to keep the story short. And I'm going to grad school in Catholic University, at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. And then had that big moment. I started teaching there. Absolutely loved it. Found kind of a love of my life. Secondary, I should mention that I met my wife through Christendom, though she was not actually here when I was, but fittingly named Sophia. So I love wisdom, love Sophia in many ways. But then off to graduate school and started teaching. Absolutely loved it. Knew I wanted to do it. And there was that big question, gosh, would I like to actually, if I have the opportunity to go back to Christendom, would I do that? Or should I more do the, quote, go out there? Well, as things fell out, I was invited to adjunct here and fell in love, in a sense, again. And realized, I put it this way, one could be tempted to think, well, you're kind of preaching to the choir, and maybe I should go out there and bring this to people that otherwise wouldn't hear it, and perhaps there's something to be said for that. But I'm now in the 30th year of being here, and I certainly would say we're a great community. We're not the choir. And we all need to learn a little better how to pursue wisdom, how to develop certain habits of mind. And I'm exceedingly grateful to have the opportunity to have wonderful families send their young folk here. And I'm now in the second generation with some, which is another added blessing. And we're on an incredibly exciting project together, and I hope to keep doing this for a long time. Yeah, so I married my wife Sophia, who is the daughter of the second president of Christendom, and we're blessed with 6 children. We're now blessed with that many born grandchildren, with a number 7 on the way. So the balance was just tipped. So life is very full. We live in a homestead nearby, and I've always said to people, I feel so blessed to have the kind of balance of being kind of rooted in the earth, in the homestead here in the beautiful valley. Is a great kind of balance, complement to pursuing wisdom in the intellectual life. It also has the wonderful aspect of, students need to split wood sometimes. Absolutely. And I love having them out to do so. It helps me, and I hope it helps them. So there's all kinds of little gifts that come along with living nearby. So there's a little sketch for you.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And lots of seeds for further conversational threads. So we'll have to return to some of those. One of the things that fascinates me about you and your work is that you've chosen a focus that's pretty unique among those who study philosophy, and this idea of the household, and this application of ancient and medieval wisdom, the great tradition, if you will, to this very neglected part of what it means to be human. And you have this online presence called Lifecraft, and it's a big umbrella that includes a lot of different articulations of wisdom in a variety of forms. Could you say a bit about this project, your work on the household?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. Thank you for asking. And it really does come from the heart. It's very close to the most important things in my life. Teaching has always been very close to my heart. In philosophy, I have always been most interested in ethics. I recognize with the great tradition a kind of primacy of the contemplative aspect, and the highest sciences are the more speculative as opposed to practical. But then again, in the great harmony of things, there's no doing the speculative without the practical.
Right.
And so thinking about principles of the good life has endless interest for me. And I first kind of focused on natural law, basic principles we can see through the light of natural reason about how to live the good life. Kind of then became particularly interested in friendship, found that was an especially transformative aspect of my teaching, of what went on in the classroom. And then kind of what naturally grew out of that was this interest in the household and it being centered in marriage. And I will say the thing that I love about, again, ethics, thinking about the good life is, well, obviously, it's so connected to every day. And anyone who thinks that studying philosophy doesn't have practical implications, well, in any case, hasn't studied ethics, because it asks the questions, the questions that matter. And it again, endless richness. There's always deeper to look. And here I'm just following my mentors both dead and alive, but here I mean Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, living the examined life, going back and trying to find the principles of what this good life is. So it always was connected by the grace of God. I try. We don't have to unfold here whether I succeed or not, but I try to live these principles in my life. So the challenges of my daily life give endless fodder for coming back and thinking about, hey, what principles can kind of help me think about and thus do this better? Sure. So I've certainly found that as regards friendship. But then particularly, I dare say at the center of my life as a married man is my marriage and my children and the household in which we live together. So it just naturally directed me towards, I need help.
Right.
I have to think about this. I want to think about it better. And so I went to the teachers that I've kind of always gone to, and the great authors, and was, in a sense, surprised but not surprised to find that though Aristotle doesn't get family and household perfectly right, he certainly sees key things that then St. Thomas Aquinas brings out, and I was so enriched by it. Mm-hmm. And you as a teacher know we love it when we can teach a course that kind of connects with the things that are really churning in our own mind anyway. Right. And so I'm like halfway into my 30 years or so, I turned to, I've got to study more and teach more about family and household. So the Lifecraft, in short, came out of, I see how this changes people's lives in the classroom by the grace of God. It's the truths that change people's lives. It would be good for me to have this further exercise in writing more about them and trying to share it with a broader audience. And I've just been really edified, inspired, encouraged in, particularly today, no surprise, people, especially people who didn't have the opportunity for this kind of college education, are really looking for these kind of principles. So that was the origin of kind of bringing it online in Lifecraft.
Sure. No, that's great. Well, and I think for those maybe who may be encountering some of these ideas for the first time, could you distinguish, and perhaps there are overlapping spheres here, maybe the idea about the home versus the household, the family. What when you use the term household, what are we talking about exactly?
Thank you. The word exactly there's the tricky one.
With an appropriate degree of exactly.
Yeah, thank you. The exact right question to ask, and here's the angle I'd go for here. Many today see by simply opening our eyes in looking both outside our windows and inside our windows that family life is very challenged, and that in many ways this is the epicenter of the drama of human life. In a sense, it's always been the epicenter of the drama, but in a particular way, dare I say, the evil one I may be so bold to put it this way. He knows what to go after. And clearly, in so many different ways, our life in the home, in marriage, in our family has been coming apart. All right, so many people are in the zone of kind of, let's try to restore, let's try to help the family. This is a great way of saying it. This is a great focus. Family, I think if we get a little bit philosophical and kind of use terms, start to use them a little more carefully, a family more refers to kind of simply a group of people that have a certain relationship to one another, normally rooted in blood ties, and of course there can be the other beautiful aspects of adoption also. But household adds another element. In the way I'd say it right now is I like to focus on household because I think that thinking about household is in many ways the hidden key to renewing the family. So to think better about the family, let's think a little bit more broadly and think about the household. Household, for Aristotle, is a community of daily life. But because it's a community of daily life, it is always centered in the people, the persons, that's key, but also includes kind of all the other things that are necessary for daily life. And so your physical possessions, in an important sense, are part of the household. And so it's a slightly broader term. It's a little bit of a richer term. And also even as regards persons, there can be people, and traditionally this was more so in the past, you could have a member of your household that's not necessarily a member of your family. Another thing that just kind of shows the distinction is this. I still consider myself part of my family of origin, but I am not, my father has passed, my mother hasn't, but she's still my family, but she's not in my household. So to think in terms of the household really focuses us on who in God's providence am I living with, forging a community every day as kind of the central focus, not the only focus, but kind of a central focus of my life. And so it gives us a richer sense of what there's a natural plan from God as regards how we do family.
Right. Yeah, this is helpful. And it seems very timely, especially if you dig into this a bit. And maybe you can say some things about this. I mean, in the household, you have a father, you have a mother, and that's going to lead us directly to questions about what those words mean. What does it mean to be a man in a household, a husband, the father? What does it mean to be a woman, and the wife, the mother? Can you say a bit about those roles in the household and how they both inform what it means when we say household and what household says about those?
Sure. So much richness. Okay. Well, how about let's start with this principle from Aristotle, which I think is kind of an overarching one. It sounds so simple when you say it, but there's so much meaning in here. It's always about persons, not things. But because it's about persons, it's also about things. In other words, the things take their importance from the persons that they serve. So there's a great principle where Aristotle will say it's always fundamentally about the relationships. So he talks about there being the father and the mother. Okay, they're the kind of foundation. For Aristotle, as soon as you marry, you have a household. Because now you are living together, you have a little daily community of life that you, even before you're blessed with children, even if you're not blessed with children, you still have a community there. And so that's always, the marriage relationship in all of its richness is always the kind of fertile ground, that rich root from which comes the nature of the household and from which comes the kind of fullness of life in the household. And then there's this, God willing, the beautiful and natural fruit of that, the relationship of parent to child. So I love how Aristotle always brings us back to it's about relationships. And so I love when he just reminds us, again, it sounds so simple, but there's so much here. What a husband and wife should always be focusing on first in their life. How is our relationship? How is our relationship with our children? How is our relationship? How is our relationship with our children? And then from there, other relationships, but always a kind of primacy of persons. So first of all, I love that. A great reason to look more deeply into the richness of what is marriage. Now to go more specifically to the beautiful thing that of the distinction between man and woman, because it's always about seeing the plan. All this, you couldn't have made up household.
Right.
We didn't decide one day to live in households. Oh, this would be a nice idea. It's written into us. It's always a matter of our discovering something. So here's a neat aspect of it that kind of goes back to your earlier question of what kind of more richness do we get from the notion of household. The complementarity of man and woman. And here I go to another ancient thinker. Xenophon brings this out in his great dialogue called The Estate Manager. He brings out that a husband and a wife, a man and woman, are not only complementary in the obvious kind of biological ways in the raising of children, but they're also complementary in the running of the household in its daily features. And this is something that tends to be often missed. I think this is a part of the richness that's part of what I call the evisceration of home life. And what the big problem with the evisceration of home life and the kind of activities we do there is because it hurts people. Right? The relationships suffer from not having this richness. So just to get very concrete, the ancients thought the household was where there'd be more productive activity. But in that productive activity, they thought that this was especially important for a man and a woman working together in it, and they're having distinct roles in it. That the very work of the household, even independently of talking about strictly raising the children, though there always is a focus on raising the children, there's also just the work of daily life in the household is something that brings together a man and woman and highlights their wonderful, beautiful complementarity for a common good. So there, I just point out a natural plan in even how we eat, how we get our food, how we prepare our food. There's a place for man, there's a place for woman. I'm not saying that in a strict division or there's an absolute, it has to be exactly this way. But if we're attentive to the natural plan, we discover there's a gift of masculinity there and femininity in a much greater richness than we normally think.
Yeah, and it seems like this is a source of wisdom for, I think, young men and young women. I mean, we think about the crisis of young men trying to figure out what it means to be a man. This question of toxic masculinity, which we've heard so much about recently. The question that comes up is, well, if all of the older models have been discredited, then what's the alternative? And then there are those who go to extremes, particularly in online environments. What's the wisdom from the household in particular about what does it offer young men who are trying to figure out this question?
I love that question, and I mean it offers them a clearer vision of what they were made for. And I mean, is it one way of saying what so many of us in general, and then more specifically young men, are missing, is the great plan of nature, even naturally, and this is even abstracting from supernatural, and the supernatural is this great further kind of fulfillment, but it gives you a sense of the greatness that we are naturally and supernaturally called to. It gives us a sense of that end. It gives us that which stepping up to and stepping into will discover ourselves. So many have pointed out, Jordan Peterson, part of the great splash in popularity is he said, stop telling men that there's not something demanding and specific that they are called to. Right? I mean that took the world by storm because someone was finally just willing to say it. Well, the things that we could talk about here about household are precisely the things that, again, so many different angles. The aspect of if you are called to be married and if you choose to be married, what this is going to demand of you, what this is going to give you the opportunity to have to develop in yourself simply for fundamental success in it. And so again, this is what we always find in God's plan. It demands of us exactly what will be our fulfillment. So, I mean, more specifically, we could say things like man's particular strengths, beginning with simply his bodily strength. That a household is a very embodied, a very incarnate place. This is why you have the physical structure that you do. because it is what is so well suited to serving, to taking care of your wife and your children and others in your household. I mean, just to give them that sense of purpose and direction. And no, don't work out so that you can post it on social media and look good. Work out in a reasonable way, and here, give a good reason, and that will lead to more reasonable working out. The kind of working out that gives you the kind of strength and endurance that is truly manly, right, and fits with the higher goals of manliness. So all of the various, as just one example, I think a very big one, I mean, likewise, even in your studying. I mean, I'd love to have an opportunity to talk about why I love teaching these principles in the classroom, because it's important for them to understand these things so that they are better fitted, better prepared to be able to go and live these things, have these kind of things to talk about with those who are going to be their friends, right? So much there, but
yeah. No, this is fascinating, and there's I think you sort of led us here, so I'll ask the question: what are the implications for your work on the household in the classroom? I mean, you talk a lot about craft, about and there's the corollary for apprenticeship. How does this all play out in the classroom, both in terms of the specific content, if you will, of the philosophy of the household, but also some of the broader themes? How do these things how do they find their way into the classroom, both in the how and the what?
Yeah, that's a rich question. I'm just going to go where my mind is taking me right now to share a little bit of the richness. I'm, again, just so grateful. And some, Psalm 116. How can I repay for the Lord for the many gifts He's given? I mean, the uniqueness of having people that really want to learn this, because they have a sense of they need to study this, they need to come to understand this better. So the utterly unique experience of being in a classroom. I always say to people, if you're not in the classroom together, we just can't explain what happens in there. There's something so utterly unique after the sign of the cross, and we're praying. We're doing something so unique, so special, so focused, so important, so rich, so demanding. And so here we are talking about these things that everyone deeply feels in their gut is going to make the big difference in their life. So we have this opportunity with students that have that sense of, we've got to do this. We're going to have to focus. We have to make distinctions. And there often aren't easy answers. It's not as though, here are the pre-packaged 10 things. Right. Just remember these and you're going to be great. No, I mean, they're hard questions. And it goes against the grain of some things they've been taught or they're already thinking. Or how do we fit this in? Right, here's the principle, but in today's age, how are you actually going to apply that? Oh my goodness, that's a big part of this, because you have to live in the age in which you are. You can't pretend as though you're running around in a toga, in Athens and doing the household thing with Aristotle. We're not. We're right here. We have to deal with cell phones and all kinds of other stuff. Just another thing that strikes me there is, and then to be able to invite the students out to the home and split wood together, and say, this isn't some overly self-reflective project. Here, now come learn by doing this. It kind of happens naturally, right? And come over and let's sit by the fire, and now let's read a piece of literature together that's going to give us the opportunity to think hard once again about these issues. I mean, there I'd say it forms in them habits of asking questions and seeking answers even when it's hard. It forms in them habits of certain kind of discussion, which frankly is the epicenter of marriage. Because anyone who's married knows that at the heart of it is we're constantly trying to figure things out. Right. How, Lord, help me figure out how I can serve my wife. How can we figure these things out together? So in a sense, we're asking those questions, forming those habits. It's not just about answering all the questions here in the classroom. It's about getting a certain approach where then they're going to have a sense of what they want to do, and hopefully give them confidence. Give them confidence that there are answers, and in any case, we're going to keep making progress together. And just in that, your household's going to be a beautiful place. Your children, if you're blessed with children, are going to start to form these own habits by seeing it in you. Those are the thoughts that come. That was a bit of a smattering, George. But
No, that's great. That's great. And you used a word a little while ago, evisceration, and thinking of the evisceration of the family, the evisceration of the household. In some of your writings, you talk about economic factors. Then there are the technological factors. There are other kinds of things at play. With a view toward applying the ancient wisdom, bringing the ideal into the present circumstances in a prudential way. What, to your mind, are the most challenging economic, technological dimensions that are confronting the household today? And do you have any advice for how to manage these things or how to deal with these things?
You specialize in asking the hardest questions, but then again, the hardest questions are often the best. I would go, first of all, universal to centrifugal forces. There are so many things. Centrifugal means literally fleeing the center. There are so many centrifugal forces in our household. Some of them we might need to get rid of. Others we can't get rid of. But we need to recognize they're there. Quick example. Sports, tricky thing. Sports are going to be discerned by many to be a very reasonable thing to be done in a household. There it is. We do that in our household. But we have to recognize how that can be just another centrifugal force kind of taking us, the children, away from the center of the household. So the evisceration is so much of daily life used to be there. Well, maybe we just live in a new world. Well, we absolutely do live in a new world. But are we missing something natural? Are we missing something that by a natural plan coulda, and not only coulda, shoulda been more in place? So I like to say looking for ordinary activities kind of in the heart of the home that can act as centripetal forces, more bringing things back in. And so in any case, to begin with this attitude of say, if we're married and think about our household together with the spouse, great kind of conversation, the kind of conversation that grows a friendship, grows the marriage. Let's be more intentional about our household. Take a great point I love to quote St. Thomas Aquinas on, that you begin by putting your intention in the home. And he quotes a line of scripture where it's, gather yourself there. Bring your intention into the home. Put your focus there. In many ways, our homes are not the object of our intention. Here I think especially of men. And you mentioned the economic challenges. And this is understandable. This isn't to whack men with the bat, but we need to recognize where the problems are so we can do our best to face them. Very often our careers, our professions take us remotely and take a lot of energy, and we're putting a ton in it. How many husbands have I talked to and they're weeping? They recognize this as a problem. I have to have this job. I have to be maybe even putting in these extra hours. And my wife and my children are feeling the lack of my presence. Okay, yes, there in that case, your job and the demands of it are one of those centrifugal forces. And there's no magic formula here that's going to solve it. I can't just say, well, I'll just stop doing that. Although we do re-examine, ask ourselves, how can we perhaps try to get a little bit more time at home? But in any case, recognize the problem and then begin with my intention, my attention, more invest my home, beginning with my wife, because my marital relationship is always first. More give my heart to my wife. Sounds simple, sounds Hallmark card. It's not simple. Well, it's simple in one sense. It's not easy. It's very rich. And then there we start to build on from there. And so there I always like to, there is hope. Of course there's hope. The Lord asked nothing of us. He's not going to give us the grace to do. This is our age. We were made for this. But if we're made for this, it involves our having a good analysis, a very open-eyed analysis of the kind of challenges, again, such as how are we going to handle the sports and not get carried away and have that just be something where we're never together at home? Again, the challenge of your profession. How are we gonna think about that? The challenge of technology. Technology is one of the biggest centrifugal forces because it's our technologies whereby we entertain ourselves almost always, again, kind of take us away. It's not a way of really coming together in a very rich way to just simply watch something together.
Right.
Again, just deserves discussion, needs nuance, but again, another challenge. Can we find other simple, even very ordinary ways to renew things? We can. We just have to be intentional.
Yeah, and you brought to the surface a lot of different things we could talk about. One of the things that comes to mind just now is your distinction between connectedness and presence, because one of the sales pitches for a lot of the technology is that it connects us in some way.
Right.
But you say presence is actually how we should be thinking about this. Can you say a bit about that?
Thank you. Words are important. They carry a lot of meaning. And as rational creatures, we use words. We think through words. In many ways, we see reality through our words. And just to recognize, there's a particularly important one. Thank you. Presence is a really big one. Presence is being threatened. Human relationship is always at root a reality of presence. And in human relationships, bodily presence is always the gold standard. It's not the only kind of presence. There are other ways of being present. I can be present kind of through my intention, and I should try to do that. If I'm remotely, be present at home in some sense through my intention, through my heart, through my thoughts. But at the same time, you can't raise a child remotely. You can't live a marriage remotely. Bodily presence is always the gold standard. Sidebar. That gives beautiful opportunity to reflect on the Eucharist. I dare say our Lord well knows that bodily presence is the gold standard. Right. Well, that connects to household. Yeah. Bodily presence is something that's different than connectedness. Indeed, many of the things we call connected are actually absence. They're ways of our being away from where we are. So here's something that's just a very practical thing to think about. Beware of the things that take your attention away from where your body is. People that live on their phones are living very often, primarily in absence from where they are. They are not present to where obviously they should be present. That says a lot that has a lot of fruits if we, one think about that for household.
Right. Yeah, no, this is excellent. Thinking about presence, it makes me think of food and eating together, which you've touched on a bit. But maybe I could throw up a couple different ideas you can talk about in whatever order or to what degree you'd like. Thinking of food, I'm thinking of music, and I'm thinking of dancing. So, and those seem to be important parts of a household. Pick any of those or all of them. What can you say about their role in the philosophy of the household and living?
I feel like a child that's been dropped into a candy shop and said, "You can have anything you want." Wherever
you'd like to be
where to turn. Yeah. And of course, philosophers also always look for the connecting threads, and there are connecting threads. All those things are wonderfully embodied, and in human life, all things always are incarnating spiritual realities in material ways. And so our eating is very much a spiritual reality that's being enacted in bodily ways. But this is what the household is always the archetype of. Right. Going back, remember Aristotle, it's things in service of persons. It's the material as serving the spiritual. So we could use the word sacramental. Bodily things are signs of spiritual realities. This is ordinary, this is simple stuff, but it gives principles to think about how we prepare food, how we serve food, how we eat, a kind of sacramental approach. These things have spiritual consequences. Music is another so powerful. We should turn that back over to you because you're the music man. But we know that it's a gift. It's the gift of the gods. All right, I'm sorry, I just went a little Greek there. It's a gift of God that, and the angels too, and those connected there. But of how something that is in a sense material is constantly conveying spiritual richness, or in any case can, but we have to be discerning. Sure. And because in all these things, there's kind of the negative side or the ugly, phony alternative, the fake, right? So that bad music that they want to pipe into us, you know, and you could say the bad food or the bad ways of eating food, or just the fast food that's pre-prepared and shows up and whatever. I'm saying it's evil, but these things are significant. Right. When we think in terms of what we're trying to craft together.
Yeah, and there's an order to all of this. Like there's an order in music, there's an order of dancing, there's an order of food and eating that seems to be critical. And it seems you've tied this in the past, sort of the creation and cultivation of order within the household. That in some ways is one of the chief roles of the father. And the husband. Can you say a bit about the role as sort of that?
Reason, says Aristotle, says St. Thomas, is a power of perceiving order. It's always about order. God's beauty is reflected in order. We have the privilege as rational creatures of seeing order, and in view of the order we see, we give order. And the human life is always about giving order, but giving it well. Right. And the household is kind of the epicenter of what we want to craft, because crafting is always a kind of giving order. And this is the project that unites a husband and wife, and again, in which there's complementarity. Complementarity is always a gift. It's where there's difference for the sake of relationship, difference for the sake of common good. And so if we say that the man is a giver of order, it's not that that his wife doesn't give order also, but there is a kind of starting point there. I like to say, just as the man is the one who proposed marriage, a woman doesn't propose marriage, but she very much rationally, cognitively says yes and enters into it. So the husband and wife together are crafting, but there's a kind of initiative, a kind of first responsibility of the man there. Just as he's the one who came forward and proposed marriage, he's the one that should be taking the lead in making sure that we're thinking together and acting together and enacting this. And this is the richness that makes a marriage. This is why there's so much more to marriage than the modern world thinks, because you're crafting a household together, giving order together, in a complementary way.
Yeah. And I was thinking, there was in one of your writings, you spoke of how sort of the order of the place, of the interior space, gives rise to the order of the practices that unfold within it.
Right.
And there's this, and as a musician, the idea that there are these levels of order, often hidden from the surface view. Right. It seems like you can almost, the household seems to be almost symphonic in its proportions.
Amen. Amen. Higher parts, lower parts, different harmonies. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, I wish I could draw you out on that, but I don't think you're going to let me ask you about that right now.
Another time we can.
Okay.
But I'd like to bring this back, if we can, to the classroom again. So in the art of teaching, the apprenticeship of being a student in learning, how do the principles of the household play out in a classroom? Because it seems like a common thread would be leisure. You need leisure in a well-functioning household. You need leisure as a kind of precondition for learning.
Yes. Yes.
And I doubt there are many students who would say the actual being in the classroom necessarily of trying to stay focused and receive what's being offered it can be very intense.
Right.
But yeah, what are some of the threads that connect these ideas?
How about this as a connector? Order is always about putting first things first. And do we live as though what's most important is most important? This is always Socrates' line. In the household, you have a well-ordered household if we put first things first, and if the first things give meaning to the other things. That is very much a common thread between the household and the classroom. Another thing, are we putting first things first in the classroom? Are we, and that particularly means persons. Classroom is about relationship. It's about a teacher who does have a leading place, but nonetheless is not just downloading, is not just imposing, but is inviting others to join him in a project that is very much a shared one. I love the aspect of how there can be a kind of friendship and should be a kind of friendship that has to be specified between teachers and students. And it takes a lot for that to happen. It takes that space being crafted in a certain kind of way. It takes having a kind of context. It takes being part of a broader community where what goes on in the classroom is understood in a certain kind of way. It's not simply pragmatic. It's about helping persons to achieve what they're called to do. So it's a great blessing to have that opportunity. We're already here, knowing that my colleagues have the same approach. Classroom is a kind of, I almost call it sacred with a small s. It's a place that's set aside, where we come together in an absolutely unique kind of way, put first things first, pursue that together in many ways. Household, a kind of sacred place, many rich analogies there.
Yeah, yeah. And to go back to the idea of leisure and contemplation.
Yes.
I mean, how do these? I mean, how do you cultivate leisure and contemplation within the household, and so that and given how harried we all are, and
Well, first of all, we're only going to do that if we have some sense of the primacy of leisure. And that's one reason that what we're doing in the classroom is so important, because we are trying to convey the principles of this distinction. There are certain things that are worth doing in themselves, especially the more contemplative kind of things, the things that most particularly are undermined and not appreciated in our society today. So again, you raise a great question of the students that come to study that are best prepared are the ones who have already had inculcated in them a sense by simple, ordinary activities in the home, such as sitting around together at the fire, sitting around talking after the dinner, doing the dishes together, but talking about higher things, the personal communion in seeking deeper truths. This is always the heart of leisure that begins in the home. And there's this great kind of circular, wonderful harmony between home prepares people to then go to the classroom, and then classroom prepares them to go back to home, because obviously the home is more where life happens than the classroom is. But leisure always being the key, as God commanded that it be, by telling us that Sunday is the first day.
Right. Well, in this, there's an order. We've talked a lot about a lot of these themes like order and being intentional, and yet I also wonder, given certain tendencies within modernity to make everything a problem that can be solved by technology, to sort of that there's a solution, and we can apply our ratio to this and fix it. It seems like a lot of things you mentioned, just after meals, conversations that happen between other activities, that there's also a sense in which we can put things in place, we can put certain things in order, but a lot of what's most important happens in between. It's the conversations that happen after a meal,
Yes.
Or between other activities, and this goes back to the idea of presence.
It does.
I think about my own family, and some of the most important conversations happen just because we both happen to be in the room together.
Yes.
And if I had tried to set up what they used to call quality time, these conversations never would have happened.
Right.
So as important as order and intentionality is, how do we navigate this?
That's a tough one, George, and I'm going to give you a kind of pushback, and it depends on how we use the terms. Sure. I completely am with you on what many people mean by kind of quality time and organizing it, I grant. But a little counterpoint. In a more healthy society, those things where kind of they naturally arise, these occasions would more naturally arise. Now, because of the evisceration of the home, because of the change in education, it's harder to have those things naturally arise. And so to some extent, I don't think I'm pushing too hard against you here, we're going to have to try to a little bit, maybe almost like the parents crafting in a way that the children, if you're a really good crafter, it will come off as kind of natural.
Sure.
Right? So I think my immediate thought, maybe of another one, is we try to arrange our spaces, we arrange our community, we arrange our classroom, we arrange the academic situation here, again, parallel to the way we're arranging our day and our spaces and our work at home, to always having in mind that can these ordinary, wonderful things what should be ordinary, arise therein. And so it's all the more art, the better it is, looks natural.
Yeah.
So there's a quick thought.
That was always advice that my music teachers would say. If it looked like I was working hard, then it was a problem, right? It has to appear natural. No, this is fascinating, and I love the way you've tied these various things together. I also wonder, just sort of as a scholar, thinking about order and the distinction between curiositas and studiositas, and how technology can disrupt that, and that pursuit of wisdom. How do you maintain a well-ordered household of the mind, if you will? How do you cultivate that as an individual, as a scholar, as a teacher, so that it overflows into the household, into the other members of the family? Because I grant that the primacy you've given to ethics and that attraction there, it seems like the dance between the contemplative and the active is something that you're very comfortable dancing and you do in your work. But how at a certain point we have to maintain the order of our own souls in our own learning and our interests. Do you have any reflections for those who aspire to sort of following you in down this path of cultivating this area?
Well, I'm going to go spiritual here, and which is never to go tangential. It's of course to go to the heart of the matter. Order is always a matter of putting first things first, and focus on our Lord is putting first things first. So I just want, just as you're saying, how do we do this? Well, always have, what is God's will for me? What is He calling me to? What is He showing to me? What is He offering to me? And so that which hopefully unites everything, there's so much that marriage is a sacrament. It's supposed to be a sign of Christ's relationship to the church. This is all part of our serving the Lord, of trying to grow closer to Him. So that, I think, is the ultimate unifying factor. And then, wow, what would I say? Someone be open to receive a gift that's much greater, but perhaps different than we would have expected. But we're going to have to work, though. We're going to have to be willing to kind of study and get some of these principles, because how will you discover this? How will you know how to do this, especially today, if we don't kind of go to our wise masters and say, how do these things fit together? Right? I mean, it takes mentors, right? It takes being shown, being helped to see more clearly what the first things are, and then what that means for the other things. So, I need good friends. I need mentors. John, you're getting things out of order. You're not giving due attention to your family. You're not giving due attention to your students. I feel so blessed to have this kind of hybrid vocation of family life, where I always have to have a certain primacy of the family life, but in that, to be able to be a teacher at the same time. They fit very well together, but you have to go in very, very eyes open, and there can be some economic challenges too. But at the end of the day, you're given all that you need.
Yeah.
So my mind is full of too many things right now, going different directions there, George, to say more than that maybe.
No, this is great. And I think, to use the musical metaphors, there's a kind of tuning that's involved.
Amen.
A tuning
Amen.
of things. And as a kind of primary basis, if you will, sort of the base of a lot of this, you've mentioned in some of your writings the importance of gratitude and docility. So maybe as we move toward the end of this, could you say a bit about those as kind of preconditions and how we can cultivate those as a foundation for all the other things we've been discussing?
Well, those two go very well together, and it is the foundation, George. It really is. There's a lot of basic truths we need to rediscover, but they're, in a sense, they're right there, but still, it comes to the humble, comes to those who fear the Lord. And so docility literally means, a willingness to be taught. And so there's no doubt here that we're going to have to recognize there's a natural plan that we can discover. The Lord wants us to discover. He's going to help us discover it, and He's going to use human instruments, living and deceased, to help us discover it. But gratitude, gratitude here, the more we start to see, the more we're just moved with wonder and have a sense of this is all gift. But this gift demands a response. It demands much of us. Part of what it demands of me is that I be docile, that I'm willing to recognize some of these things I'm going to learn are going to be very difficult. but they're never going to be too much for us. Thank God there's God that lovingly has arranged it all. So we're never going to find out this is impossible, this doesn't work. No, actually, as I love to say to my students, things are always better than we've yet realized. We just need to keep looking. Gratitude helps us see more. Gratitude is going to make us be more docile.
Yeah, no, this is excellent. I've learned a great deal in this conversation.
Well,
thank you so much for taking
be
time
here.
for
Thank
this. I look forward to reading more of your work and continuing this conversation.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for listening to Christendom Conversations. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about Christendom College and its mission, visit us at christendom.edu. Until next time, may we all continue to seek the truth, live the faith, and restore all things in Christ. God bless.